Hello everybody, welcome back to some more Hearthstone reveals. I've just come back as well from holiday, and did I use the traveling travel agency? Maybe because I got back on time. And that is what the name of the new mini set is. Not back on time, but the traveling travel agency. I tried to fit it in there with my holiday as well. While I was gone, the new mini set was announced, which was kind of inconvenient because I couldn't, record the reveals as they came out. So a bit of forewarning for this video. I'm going to go over the neutral cards that were revealed. I'm going to do shaman, I'm going to do hunter, and I'm going to do warrior. I'm recording this as of the 6th. I have seen some of the other classes, so I know what other classes I've got going for them. I will do that in another video, which I'll try and get up the next day, the following morning, or something along those lines, just so that you know what to expect. Also, we got some little info tidbits on the Hearthstone website with the news of this coming out, which I think was announced on Tuesday, so it's about 3 or 4 days ago from now when I'm recording it. The big thing about the mini set is there are 2 new tourists, and I've got a bit of a gripe about that, which I've highlighted below. Also, they're introducing a few new card types called brochures, and they're basically cards that flip each turn. So, for example, it shows on here, we're not going to deal with this card fully enough today, we'll deal with it in a future episode. Druid is going to have an Ungoro brochure, and it's going to have a Dalaran brochure. They'll flip each turn, and one of them is draw 2 minions, give them +2/+2, and then the other flip side is draw 2 spells, they cost 1 less. That is the idea of what a brochure is. Not every class is getting a brochure, I think. I can't remember if it says it on here somewhere. Yeah, it's 3 classes are getting different brochures, so it's only a very mini mechanic, but it's a mini set, they can't do a lot about it. Anyway, getting back to the 2 more legendary tourists, my gripe about this is it means that 2 classes have got access to more cards than the other classes, which kind of seems a little bit unfair to me. I did think there was going to be some other tourist mechanic, but I thought it was going to tourist back into wild, which I think they were reluctant on doing, and I did have some reservations about that because it would require you to have a full set, and I know a lot of people that if they just play standard, sometimes does sets when they go into wild because they don't want to play wild, which would cheese you off a little bit if eventually they released a set where you had to have wild cards as well. So I kind of understand why that wasn't a thing, but I thought it would be a little bit more nuanced than just 2 classes are getting 2 more legendary tourists, but that's by the by. Anyway, we'll get into it a little bit. We also announced there was going to be, I think, 5 legendaries. The first one, which is a neutral minion, Travel Master Dungar. 9 mana 3/3 Battlecry. Summon 3 minions from your deck that are from different expansions. I believe this is the first time we have seen a bit of text on the card that relates to the expansion that the card is from. In actual words, verbiage or something, saying the expansion differences, as opposed to, there are some obviously with the tourists which say you have to play Perilous and Paradise cards. That is the tourist mechanic. There's also a card in there that says from the most recent set, which I guess references an expansion, but I think they're not quite the same as actually saying these cards, you're getting cards from different expansions explicitly in your deck. Now, there are a few cards this sort of reminds me of. It's a lot of value, summoning 3 minions from your deck is a giant effect. It's like a Yasharaj type thing where, you get this giant boy who then pulls out, ideally, another giant boy from the deck, and then you have 2 giant boys for big value. It's not quite the same in Yasharaj because you actually get a lot of more value. You get 3 big boys, and you start off with a little boy. It's actually somewhat closer towards a guardian animal type thing, in effect that you're going to probably get big stuff because you're going to bastardize your deck in such a way that you will only get big stuff because you won't put cheap stuff in your deck. It also, though, tutors, a bit like Guardian Animals could tutor for beasts that cost 5 more. This is tutoring for different expansions, right? That is your tutor. It's a little bit hard to say that's a true tutor, though, because let's be real, you're probably going to put 3 separate cards with maybe duplicates of the cards, maybe 4 cards just to be safe, from different expansions, and you're going to be happy with whatever the 3 of the 4 you get are. This is sort of my gripe with this card, and why I actually just, a bit early in advance. I don't think this card is going to work. I think it's just too slow for current Hearthstone. You have to live until turn 9 with this card. It is also making you build your deck in such a way that you kind of want a big deck. More importantly, you do not want cheap minions in your deck because you'll pull them out with Travel Master Dungar, which is not ideal. And by the way, just in case you're not aware of exactly how this works, or I believe this is the way this is going to work, is it checks the card's watermark. So I believe the core set counts as an expansion. So if you put core cards in your deck, you will pull out potentially core cards. So you can't even like sneak in some minions like a bit cheaper that, you know, he doesn't see it as an expansion. No, he sees the core set as a different expansion because of the watermark. Now, I don't know how it works if you have a card that is both in the core set and from a different set. This is an issue for Wild, really. But I'm not sure going to deal with that. I think Hearthstone will explode. Anyway, you're going to want your deck to be big, big stuff. You want this to be pulling out, you know, 8, 9, 10 cost minions. And to make sure you do that, your rest of the deck is going to have to allow you to survive until you get to Dungar. Also, ideally, you need to tutor for your Dungar, because if your Dungar is the bottom card in your deck, you have big sad times, or you need some other alternate win condition along that line. I think there are a few classes that can do things with Dungar. I think they're all going to be bad, though, because I don't think you're going to live till turn 9. But just to go through a few of them, I think Priest is like one of the numero uno candidates for this. Classically, Big Priest has been a thing. They have some great ginormous minions, and I'm just going to use some examples here because I'm actually going to pull up multiple different classes. There's so many good big cards to get, but for Priest you could get Amenthal, you could get Obsidian Statue, which is currently in the core set, Amanthal's from Titans. You could grab a Beached Whale from the Perils in Paradise set as well, a nice 420, nice minion. Then, what else do you want to do with your big minions? Well, you want to be able to cheat them back again at some other point, and Priest has got some nice Resurrect cards in there. You have Lesser Diamond Spellstone, and assuming you're going to build your deck in such a way that you're probably only going to have Amenthal, Obsidian Statues, Beach Whales, and then Dungar in your deck. That might legitimately be it. You're going to have a lot of spells in your deck is what I'm saying. You're probably going to have like 20 to 24 spells in your deck. It shouldn't be too hard to get your Spellstone going. It's also worth noting that obviously the best classes that can get to the later game are classes that are inherently pretty good at control, and Priest is classically very good at control. Also, unlike a lot of the other classes, they have two ways to abuse the cards to bring them back. You can also play Rest in Peace as well to resurrect these guys back. And generally speaking, you've got a decent chance of getting a good minion. Now, I will hand wave on this, because obviously Dungar is a 9-cost minion. So if you just ran this Amenthal, Obsidian Statue, Beach Whale, you might pull back Obsidian Statue, you might pull back Dungar, which is obviously a terrible result. So it's not great, and I will say this is just the general consensus of all the classes. None of them feel exactly perfect with the Dungar, but I think Priest is one of the better ones. Also worth noting in Priest, they actually have a few ways to discover minions from your deck that aren't related to minions, because obviously you don't want to put other minions in your deck, because then Dungar will pull them other minions out, and they probably are not going to be good if they have a Discover effect, as it's probably a Battle Cry. And you typically don't want to cheat out Battle Cries, as the Battle Cries are normally the better part of the effect of the card. Some cards, you know, withstanding. Anyway, Pendant of the Earth is a pretty good way to cheat your card. If you only have 4 different minions in your deck, there's a pretty good chance that if you discover, you know, 3 of the 4 of them, you'll hit Dungar. Sometimes you'll hit the low roll, but hell, that's what the other Pendants of the Earth are for. You can also roll a Creation Protocol in your deck, and actually just not forge it. Just play Creation Protocol on 2, and again, it's to discover a copy of a minion in your deck. It is a copy, so Dungar could then pull out Dungar, which would be a little bit annoying. Life isn't perfect, right? One other thing that's worth mentioning about the minions as well that I've been picking, you probably don't want to put 3 legendary minions as your pool of minions, because if you ever draw a minion that isn't Dungar, you're reducing the minions that Dungar can pull out. And if it's 3 legendaries, you're literally having 3 opportunities of hitting Patches. And if you hit Patches, Dungar gets 33% worse, and Dungar I don't think is great anyway, full stop. I think 9 mana splatting the board with full of minions actually isn't that good, and kind of Razzle Dazzler was a good example of that, who can fill the board full of pretty good minions. At 7 the card was pretty bad, at 6 the card was pretty good. It's still not a tier 1 deck though, it's sitting around that tier 2 deck, this double rainbow Death Knight deck. Very fun. The later and later you go, though, to generate these big board states of minions, the easier and easier it is to deal with. So I'm actually just not convinced the effect is good enough, full stop. Anyway, that's Priest done. I think Warrior could also have a legitimate idea of doing this, a little legitimate chance of doing this. You could get Zeliax in there in Unkiliax form with Taunt, of course. You could get a Monstrosity on the field into a great Taunt minion. Maybe if you play an Amplified Elec instead of the Beach Whale, just, you know, for so that you can run the Monstrosity, which is from Perils as well. Amplified Elec is from, what's it called? The music set, Festival of Legends. It was from that set. Then, obviously, you have ways of cheating stuff back. You could also run Taunt mechs as well, so that Inventor Boom can pull back 2 mechs, which is kind of like a Resurrect. But it's a good Resurrect because you can't hit Dungar. Hydration Station as well would miss Dungar, so all in all, this is actually a pretty nice package, and seemingly on the face of it might be better than Priest. The problem I've got with Warrior is they don't really have a good shooter for the Dungar, so you could get Dungar screwed. And honestly, the name Dungar, I think, is a really good name for it. You get Dungard. What they do have, though, instead is they have an alternate to Dungar. You could use a Food Fight. However, the problem with Food Fight is that you have like a roughly, it's not quite 1 in 4 because you'll have 2 Monstrosities in deck, 2 possibly Airlick, so, you know, something like that in your deck. You're going to have something like a 1 in 6 chance of pulling out your Dungar with your Food Fight, which is terrible. That is just losing on the spot, but typically these big decks aren't very consistent, and that's kind of how they're balanced. You have these potential, like, insane high highs, but you have these really low lows, and I think you just have to accept that you're going to be balancing somewhere between that. Worth noting, and Warrior's very good at control. I say very good. It was better at control, but it's classically a pretty good control class, so they could get towards turn 9. It's also worth noting as well, by the way, obviously this is Warrior Druid to put Hydration Station in. We did see this Unkiliax Warrior deck be a thing. It's been nerfed a few times because Inventor Boom got nerfed, and Hydration Station got nerfed as well, so to be different minions. It's still a pretty good deck, it's pretty good value, and it shows, like, the proof is in the pudding, right? You can actually get to those mana costs with a Warrior deck. And, you know, fight your opponents. Then we get into, like, the kind of more insane territories. Warlock potentially could do something with it, and again, it's a really good control class. They've got some good control cards. Handlock is a reasonable thing right now. Some really good big minions to cheat out with Dungar, like Thanaton would be insane. Wretched Queen's pretty good, a lot of stats for the cost. Doomguard are also pretty good if you don't get the Battle Cry and it just starts charging you in the face. They do have a Resurrect type thing as well with Endgame. You might want to pick one of, you know, your Wretched Queen or your Doomguard to, like, return back to the field. But it's a pretty nice Resurrect card, and you can't hit Dungar with it because Dungar, not a demon. The unfortunate thing, though, for Warlock is that's kind of it. They don't have other ways to re-summon these minions back, at least from what I'm aware of, and they don't have a great tutor. Again, I'm being very specific about the tutor. It's a tutor that is a spell, not a minion, because you do not want to Dungar your tutor, which you could do otherwise. The Zen Hunter is another potential class, because currently a deck exists right now called, like, Breakfast Hunter or Egg Hunter, depending on what you want to call it. They run a lot of big stuff. They normally try to yodel the egg to draw a bunch of big beasts that get discounted, and you play a bunch of the copies of the big beasts, and you just swarm your opponent with ginormous beasts with really good effects, like the Hollowhound for, like, sustain, King Plush to return stuff back to the deck and freely charge at your opponent, and then Tyrannosaurus that you don't really want to kill, but you have to kill it, and when you kill it, you potentially take 7 damage. They also run Agrimar in that deck as well. I know they're not a beast, but they use that as another, like, sustain/drawing tool. Maybe you try and just stick Bungar in this deck. I say Bungar. This is what I'm saying for Hunter. It's not a Dungar in this deck, he's a Bungar. You're bunging him in the deck. I will say the downside of that is, the weakness of this deck is it can't live long enough to get to the Yodel Egg stage, which is normally, or it used to be around, you know, 5 to 6 was their power play. It's now 4 to 5 potentially is the power play to get multiple big beasties that have got a huge discount on them back into your hand. With Bungar in the Hunter deck, you'd have to wait till 9, which is pretty expensive. But if you do wait till that point, there's actually a lot of good stuff here. The other downside is you probably want to put Yodel in this deck. You don't want to Dungar or Bungar your Yodel, so I don't think it quite fits perfectly with the breakfast package. There are some things about that breakfast package, though, that do work with this general idea of Dungar, though. You have got Stranglethorn Heart to resurrect some beasts. Now, one of the sad things about this one is we said with Warlock that they only had 1 card, at least you could have 2 copies of it. Stranglethorn Heart is a legendary, so you can only have 1 copy of this Resurrect card. So it's basically a 2 and done, and it's going to be pretty inconsistent to get the Stranglethorn Heart to get your 2 and done. So I don't think Hunter is ideal. One of the nice things about Hunter, though, funnily enough, just to add to this, they're one of the classes that one of the few classes that have multiple ways to discover minions from your deck that are spells. You could Master's Call, which is obviously not ideal because you want to hit Bungar. And Bungar is not a beast, so you won't get the 3 beasts. But to be fair, you don't want to draw the 3 beasts in that deck. So it's a pretty bad discovery. It's 3 mana to draw a card, effectively. But it's choosing for a card that you really need. Bird Watching as well, pretty good. You get some stats on Bungar, but it's not really going to make the world of difference. So I just think this is too slow. You have to be doing stuff. You can't be like playing 3 mana do nothing in a world of hand buff priest and overheal priest. Did I say hand buff priest? Hand buff paladin and overheal priest, and you know, the insanity warlocks or pain warlock. You just can't. It's just, you have to be doing stuff on turn 3 and 4, and this isn't it. You could also do some literally wacky stuff with paladin. Maybe you don't just run ginormous stuff, or I say don't run ginormous stuff, just don't run only like 5 ginormous cards. Maybe you run a smorgasbord of pretty large cards. Maybe you like hit your Annoyer Troop, your Amatus. I threw Ysera on here as well. I don't think Ysera is ever that good, but it is a value proposition card. This deck has Grillmaster, which is a pretty good shooter. Obviously, it's a minion shooter, which is not ideal because you could hit the Grillmaster with... are you a Bungar in this deck? No, we'll call you a Dungar again. We could hit Grillmaster with Dungar, which is obviously a pretty low roll. It's not terrible though, because he does have a Death Rattle, so you do get to draw a card from the Dungar, but obviously it's weakened some other things like Amatus or Annoyer Troop. The other sad thing about this deck is you'd have to be a bit careful if you're going to use Grillmaster, because Dungus... I'm calling it Dungus now. Dungus is unfortunately a 9-mana card, so he would fight with Annoyer Troop, he would fight with, you know, I don't think you'd put Ysera in the deck, but you might want to put Yogg in the deck, and that is also a 9, so he'd fight with a lot of these mana cost cards. A bit like in the Priest example, so it's not ideal. You'd have to probably keep stuff below 9, so 8 or below, which is probably a little bit too restrictive. The nice thing about this class is they do have a resurrect mechanic. Unfortunately, you don't get the full stat of the minions. You do get a lot of minions, but they're all 2/2, so you really need stuff with good death rattles, good aura effects, just titans. Let's be real, just titans. Other fun memey stuff though that you could do with this more minion-based deck where you have a lot of more larger minions. You could try and run this as a Kangor deck instead, where you cheat out Kangor with your Dungus, and any big minions that are in your hand, like any of the patches that you've drawn in the meantime, Kangor could then cheat them back out your hand, and it's just basically this non-stop, like, what's it in the world, conveyor belt of ginormous stuff. I don't think it's good enough. It's very memey, but kind of fun. I think the final one I'm going to show off right now, Shaman could potentially do something with this as well. They have some big stuff. Walking Mountain would obviously be a pretty nice thing to cheat out. Same with Rocket Hopper. Both have Rush. One is Mega Wind Fury. And that's a lot of stats for the cost, right? That is, just of those two cards, 1426 of stats to go with the 3/3 of Dungar. I've shown on here Ragnaros. There's probably some world where you can set some sort of elemental deck up with Therazane as well. Unfortunately, Therazane's in the same set as a lot of the other big elementals for Shaman, but maybe you can do some sort of memey stuff with big Shaman elemental decks with like Rag and all other stuff like that in there. One nice thing about Shaman is they have actually got a very, very good shooter for Dungar. If it's your only Battlecry minion in your deck, which it probably will be if you're going to cheat out ginormous guys, you could use Fairy Tale Forest literally as discover one Battlecry minion in your deck, and that's all it's there for. 3 mana, find a guy. It's a really important guy. Downside of this though, again, it's 3 mana, do nothing for the rest of your turn, which against a lot of the meta decks right now, basically is a death sentence. Control Shaman though isn't a bad thing, so you could potentially live till 9 with like a control-y based Shaman. There's a lot of good spells in Shaman. A lot of good discovers as well to find new spells to answer certain solutions. So I don't think this is actually completely crazy. The unfortunate thing about Shaman though is they don't have a resurrect thing to get these minions back again. The closest kind of things I thought about doing this, and it really messes your deck up if you do this. If you put Cookie in the deck, you could try and run like Cliff Dive in your deck as well. It's not the same as resurrecting a card, but it's sort of like tangentially similar in the fact that it gives you like a Dungar-like effect. You get like maybe a big Rocket Hopper, a big Walking Mountain, and if you hit your Cookie, maybe you can kill one of your other minions and get it to evolve instead, and stay on the board instead of going back into your deck with Cliff Dive. I think it's a bit of a pipe dream, but, you know, watch out for these decks in the future. I could see some big minion-based decks being made viable via Dungar. I just don't think any of them right now will make the cut. So just come back to this card. I think the issue again, you have to get to 9. It's too slow. You have to like make so many big changes to your deck to make it work. I think it sits along the category of like Califero, where Califero could do some really disgusting things, but you have to set up your deck in a very unique way to get this disgusting thing to happen. You need a pretty good draw as well for it to happen. Like you have to draw Dungar early, you have to draw Califero early. It just won't work, I think. On to the next legendary. He's back! It's Zephrys again. 3 mana, 3/2 elemental Dream Planner Zephrys. Battlecry, choose a travel tour to get 2 potentially perfect cards from it. Alright, I like that Hearthstone in like the last set or two has printed a bunch of cards which don't really tell you what they do on the card itself, so I'll try and explain it to you. One key thing about this compared to old Zephrys is old Zephrys used to look at your board state and give you the perfect card for that situation of the board state. This Zephrys does not look at the board state. That is the first thing to be aware of. So when it asks you to do a potentially, to give you a travel tour to get potentially perfect cards from it, you'll get offered 3 tours. You'll get offered the Extravagant Tour, the Hectic Tour, and the Modest Tour. The Extravagant Tour gives you 2 random cards that can potentially spend a lot of mana, aka it gives you big stuff. The Hectic Tour gives you random cards that can potentially deal damage to the enemy hero, stuff that shoots your opponent in the face. And then the Modest Tour gives you 2 random cards that can potentially impact the enemy's battlefield. I think this is the most hand-wavy of them. I kind of see this as, like, it gives you control-based cards. Maybe stuff that can let you survive, stuff that polymorphs minions, stuff that clears minions. So, it's a big pool of stuff that you can get from, like, the Modest Tours, and fairly big from, like, the Hectic Tour and the Extravagant Tour as well. So, again, a key point about this Zephrys is it does not look at the board state when it gives you these random cards. You are literally just picking 2 random cards. I say picking. You're getting 2 random cards from a tour you pick, which is from, like, a more precise pool. Now, I'm not going to go through every single pool of card. If you click on the Hearthstone card library page, it gives you related cards, which basically shows you what the cards are on this card. I think someone has deduced, like, which pool each card comes from. There are basically a lot of good classic cards that exist in Hearthstone now in Standard, and some stuff from the old times. I'd probably say the 2 things from the old times to be most aware of is Ice Block is something that is discoverable. I assume this is in the one that affects the board state, and that could make you immune and give you another turn to set up and maybe kill your opponent. Also, there's a lot of stuff in here with just doing damage to the face, like fireballs and that type of thing. Also in this pool, I think, is Mind Blast, and Mind Blast was always a really good way of dealing damage to your opponent's face via Priest. And actually, Priest basically lost this archetype as the dev team decided that Priest should not be a spell damage face class, and that meant that Velen and Mind Blast basically got removed from the Standard set, and I don't think they'll ever return. I think it's just like an archetype they don't want to ever exist. That being said, Mind Blast being generated in other classes, it's pretty good aggressive damage to the face, and if that's what you're looking for, fantastic. Mind Blast would be a really good card to get. So there are other things obviously here, like there's Twisting, but you could put Twisting in your deck. Brawl is in here, you could put Brawl in your deck. That type of thing. Mounting Giants, cool. Sylvanas, cool. All I'm saying is, you're not getting exactly, like, the perfect cards, and it's kind of like, you know, where it illuminates on the card where it says potentially perfect. I think more often than not, it's going to be pretty frustrating, this card. You may have also heard, like, or even seen your windows shaking. That was from, Zeddy Exhaling, because Zephrys is a 3-mana card, and you have to be careful with 3-mana and 4-mana cards right now in the existence of Rogue, because you could Shadow Step this bad boy and Sonya it, and you get lots of cards. Do I think this is a good play? No, I think this is pretty bad for kind of the same reason that not a lot of value decks do particularly well right now. It's much better to put cards in your deck that you know are good in your deck, rather than generate random cards and hope that they all form a good deck together. Sometimes that will work, and you'll be playing, you know, your Yu-Gi-Oh! Matchup against your opponent where you're playing the heart of the cards, and you beat them. That will happen 1 in every 12 games. The other 11 out of the 12 games, you will generate absolute detritus, you'll generate Announced Darkness, and, well, you can't generate Announced Darkness, but you get the idea. You'll just generate the potentially perfect cards that aren't the perfect parts of the pool, so it's a lot of value, but I just don't see this being a good idea. And to be honest with you, I don't think Zephrys is particularly good either. I think this is a pretty underwhelming card. It definitely goes into some sort of value deck that can go later into the game. Some classes probably will, like, humor this card, but I just don't see it happening. To be honest with you, the deck or the class I think it most likely might see some play in is some sort of Highlander Shaman deck where they do generate a ton of value. They'd be pretty happy to have a Battlecry card in there, and they can slow the game down a little bit, and actually wouldn't mind a little bit of extra value along the way. So yeah, that's why I think it's going to see some play. Now we get to the Tourist. The first Tourist, and it's actually the only one I'm going to show in this video. Turbulus. 4-mana 3/4 Elemental is the Hunter Taurus, so Shaman can now Taurus in Hunterland. Battlecry, give +1/+1 to all other Battlecry minions in your hand, deck, and crucially Battlefield. This is very similar to the Mistcaller. Important things to note between these two cards. Mistcaller hit every minion. It didn't say, you know, it had to be a Battlecry minion. But what's nice on Turbulus side of things is, firstly, it comes up 2 mana earlier, and you want these effects that hit your entire deck to come up as soon as possible to get the most benefit of the card itself. You also want it to be pretty well statted, and actually the Mistcaller was very poorly statted for 6 mana. You only got 8/8 stats. Turbulus is obviously understated because it's a really good effect, but it's not too far from the realms of, you know, a good card. If this was a 3 mana card, it would be disgusting. So having 1 mana on top of that is actually not too bad, all being said. Also, in terms of everything all being said, Shaman is probably the one class that could build an entire Battlecry deck and it function. Like, they have so many good Battlecries, and this just adds to the Battlecries. By the way, these new tourists from, like, you know, other classes to the old classes mean that the old classes which had, you know, star ratings, throw them out the window, because the ratings kind of have to be re-rated now, because I rated those cards, you know, as the class they could exist in, the class that could tourist into them, and then they could tourist into another class as well. This just, you know, adds another variable to the equation. It adds another level of dimension. We were playing 4-dimensional chess. We're now playing 5-dimensional chess while doing, you know, this type of thing. It's bonkers. But what I'm going to say here is Hunter actually has a Battlecry package, so to speak. They have the Pet Parrot, they have the Sasquatch, which is a really potentially good value card, Parrot Sanctuary, which I'm not sure you would actually run in this deck, but you could discount your Battlecry minions, maybe get your Turbulus up on turn 3, as I said, because that would be actually insane. And then there's also Chatty McCaw if you are running some sort of targeted spell. Chatty McCaw can repeat it, and just spoil for the future, there is a pretty good targeted spell, I think, for the Chatty McCaw coming up. Obviously, then, Turbulus, you need some good battle cries from the Shaman side of things, and that is not a problem. The Shaman has good battle cries. They have Shudder Block, fantastic battle cry. They have Murloc Growthin, very good battle cry, also loves getting buffed, and Turbulus buffs the Growthin. So that is actually just fantastic. You can then throw stuff in from, like, neutral and like the Azurite Chain Gang, where you get more value from your stats, same like the Growthin, because it generates copies of the card. Maybe you throw in an Azurite Chain Gang with the hope that you quick draw it. If you do quick draw it, you're getting like an additional +3/+3 than you otherwise would do from just Turbulus. Similarly, Shining Sentinel exists in Shaman right now, and again, they copy the card. This one has Taunt and Elusive, which makes it even harder to remove. All of these battle cries, all of them pretty decent cards in my book. And maybe you can run this, like, tempo battle cry deck with Turbulus, with a lot of minions. It's kind of like similar to how hand buff Paladin kind of works, but rather than buffing the cards in your hand, you buff all the cards in your deck in one instance, and then just try and, you know, like, machine your opponent down, just grind them down with big stats for the cost. Now, also worth mentioning in all of this, there are some really good marriages of the Hunter and Shaman cards. Murloc Growthin and Pet Parrot is a really good combo wombo. You play your Murloc Growthin on turn 1, you play into Pet Parrot. Pet Parrot repeats the last card that you played, which gives you a Murloc Growthin. I think it gives you the Gigantic card as well, and plays the Battlecry as well, so you get another 2/2 stats on top of your 1/1. So it's like, you sort of get a 2 mana 3/3, and 2/2 of the stats rush, and you generate a decent card in your deck. You get the big guy, who also likes getting buffed, so that's a really good combo wombo. The other combo wombo, you can do some really disgusting things. It's a lot of setting up to do this, so I think it's something that you pull off, not quite at random, but you won't get it every single game. It's something to do with, like, Shudder Blocking and Sasquatching afterwards. I don't think you're going to Shudder Block into Sasquatch directly, although that would give you a lot of minis, I think you would get the minis from that, so maybe you do that. But what I'm really thinking of is that you Shudder Block into another Battlecry card, and then you mini the Shudder Block onto the Sasquatch. So just as some examples here of that type of combo, if you got Turbulus in between this play, you Shudder Block, you play Turbulus, you get 3/3 instead of stats on your Turbulus. Then you play the mini on the Sasquatch, it replays the Turbulus 3 times, and you get +3/+3 to everything in your deck again. And also you get the stats of the minions, of course. You get a bunch of 3/4s. That is disgusting. Like, that is insanely disgusting. Also disgusting is Incendious. Now, there is a setup in Standard, which I don't know where it is right now. I think it's hovering around the tier 3 region. It's a bit of a meme deck where you Shudder Block your Incendious to put 15 eruptions into your deck, and then you cycle your deck to hit all the eruptions and just basically machine gun your opponent down with eruptions. That's good. Okay, that's good. 15 eruptions, very good. What about if you put 20 eruptions in your deck? If you put your Shudder Block into your Insidious, that actually is potentially more, I think. No, it's not. It is more damage, though. If you Shudder Block into your Insidious as before, you shuffle 15 eruptions into your deck. You buff the eruptions as well to be 2 damage. If you then play the Shudder Block, the small mini, into Sasquatch, you will play the Insidiouses 3 times, which I think then shuffles another 15 eruptions into the deck, making... I think it does work. I think you actually put 30 eruptions into the deck, and then they all get upgraded a further 3 times. I think that's the way that works, and it'll turn them into 5 damage eruptions, which if you get any form of draw, because I don't think you would actually run the cycle package in this, I think you would just draw cards, just natively, you will kill your opponent. Like, one of the weaknesses of that deck is that you can sort of heal away the chip damage, potentially, if they get a poor cycle. You can't do it when they're doing 5 damage, like, per draw. It's just, it's too much, it's disgusting. I'm going to try and do it, though, when the mini set comes out. You could also then look for, like, some big value turns. Maybe you don't try and get, you know, this disgusting board state or some disgusting setting up of the deck. You just copy your hand 3 additional times. Or, you know, maybe even more than that, maybe 6 times. You put a bunch of snapshots in your deck and you just keep drawing those cards and just keep playing big guy after big guy after big guy, value after value after value. And eventually your opponent will run out of stuff. Like, it is just the nature of Hearthstone. If you're generating a ton of value and your opponent isn't generating that much value, they will run out of stuff before you, and eventually you'll win. So maybe you do something along those lines. You can also use Shining Sentinel as well. The slight downside of this is you probably have to have the, well, you definitely have the mini and the Sasquatch on the board, so the other 5 slots will get filled with your 3/7 Shining Sentinels. It's still a lot of stats for the cost, but I think some of the other stuff you can do is a little bit more cheaty. And by the way, there are other, like, battle cries you can, like, sneak into this as well, which do even more disgusting things. Oh, actually, just one final thing, I guess. I didn't put it on the card, but I think it would work this way. You can't damage enemy heroes via Shudder Block, but I think you can via Sasquatch, so you could potentially triple Battlecry, something that does damage to the face, and a mini the Sasquatch, and I think that would work. I'm not actually 100% certain exactly how the you can't damage the hero works with the mini block into Sasquatch. It might not work. Maybe it's something you need to do testing on. Maybe it sees it as the same interaction and just says, nope, you're not doing that. I don't actually know how that is coded, but just something to be aware of to test to see if it works. Next we get to Hydration Totem, a new totem. 2 mana 0/3. At the end of your turn, give adjacent minions +1/+1. Low-key, kind of insane, this card, when I saw it. I've actually, like, cooled off a little bit on this card. When I saw it at first, I was like, holy shit, this card is, like, kind of insane. Why did I say that? Well, Fungalmancer, when it was I think Fungalmancer used to be 4. It might have even been 3 mana, this card. Whatever it was disgustingly broken. They had to nerf it to 5. Wriggling Horror, though, which was a 2 mana card as well, which gave adjacent minions +1/+1, did see some play in Stilt Demon Hunter, which was a pretty strong deck that had a very aggressive curve to it. That gave adjacent minions +1/+1 on the battle cry. If Hydration Totem lives on the field, that can give you the 2/2 to adjacent minions for 2. That's crazy. Obviously, the key part of that is it has to live, which it probably isn't, let's be real. 3 damage on turns 2 or 3 for your opponent is something they're probably going to be able to do. Especially with Hydration Totem is there, you'll probably have to, like, throw everything at the totem. One nice thing that you would want with this Hydration Totem, though, is something on turn 1 that generates you 2 minions. Look at Murloc Growthin. He's very good at generating 2 minions on turn 1. You play your Murloc Growthin, you go into turn 2, your opponent maybe doesn't deal with either of the Growthins, you play your Hydration Totem, and it's something like that 2/2s instead. And you have the Hydration Totem, and your opponent has to kind of deal with everything. It's pretty spooky. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Flame Tongue Totem. That used to be a bit more aggressive when I think it used to be 3 mana with 3 attack, and they pulled it down to 2 with 2. Flame Tongue Totem is giving you like 4 stats roughly to adjacent minions. Hydration Totem is as well. It isn't giving it into attack though, it's giving it into both attack and health. However, it's permanent, it's not temporary like the Flame Tongue Totem where you could kind of diffuse the situation. You can't fully diffuse the totem, the Hydration Totem this is. You can't, I was going to say put it out, but you'd be putting out the Flame Tongue Totem. You can't steam off the Hydration Totem. You will always have this innate stat buff at the end of it. Now, there is one big disadvantage of this card, you may have realised it by now, compared to all the other things here. And it is that it is at the end of the turn. Fungalmancer and Wriggling Horror were so nice because they instantly gave you these stats. Hydration Totem doesn't instantly give you the stats, it waits till the end of the turn, so you can't get the benefits of the +2/+2 on that turn, and anytime you get stats later into the game, they get a little bit weaker and weaker and weaker, because your opponent is more capable of dealing with them as the game goes on. So I think there is a world where this card sees a bit of play, but I just don't fully see it. I think it's actually going to be just too weak, because it's going to be a little bit too slow for the current meta. Next we get to the first brochure. We have Ice Crown Brochure, which flips into Black Rock Brochure. They are both 2-mana spells. I think all the brochures are the same mana cost on the spells, FYI. The Ice Crown Brochure is a frost spell that does 3 damage to a minion and freezes its neighbours. The Black Rock Brochure does 3 damage to a minion and 1 damage to its neighbours, and it's a fire spell instead. Obviously there are some cards these are related to. Ice Crown Brochure is the opposite of Avalanche. Avalanche used to freeze a minion and did 3 damage to the adjacent minions. Ice Crown Brochure does freeze to the middle minion. No, it does 3 damage to the middle minion and does freeze to both the other ones. It is a 2-mana discount on Avalanche, but you are dealing half the damage. But it's not completely terrible. I see worlds where this is pretty useful. Black Rock Brochure, I'm not exactly sure the card is referencing it. I think it's trying to reference Meteor, but obviously like hugely toned down to be a 2-mana card. But it's actually pretty close to Bowler Shot that used to be in Hunter, where Bowler Shot did 1 damage to a minion and then 2 damage to the neighbours, aka did 5 damage in total. Brochure does 3 damage to the middle one and 1 to the other ones, aka 5 damage in total. I will say about the brochure on the Blackrock side of things, you probably would like it in that orientation. You have big damage to one minion and less damage to the other minions, because obviously one of the weaknesses of this card is that if you're not hitting 3 minions with this card, you're pretty much not getting the full value from the card, and you're getting something a lot weaker. Kel Surprise. Other disadvantage of it is your opponent could have 3 minions and play around it. I think it's a little bit harder to play around if you're doing 3 damage to 1 minion, because even if they put it on the outside, you're still going to get the extra 1 damage, which 2 damage for 4 damage to minions, not great, but not absolutely terrible. On the side of the Ice Crown Brochure as well, Soul Freezer saw a little bit of play in Warlock. I think it's actually been seeing some play in the Insanity Warlock deck to slow the game down a little bit. Ice Crown Brochure is kind of like kill a guy at 2 mana, dealing 3 damage is going to kill most minions, and freezes 2 other minions. A really good anti-aggro tool, so I really like the Ice Crown Brochure. Is it good enough to see play? I'm actually not entirely certain. I'm a bit hand-wavy on it. I think it's just a touch too weak. In terms of Black Rock Brochure as well, you could kind of compare it to Heatwave as well, but not with the quick draw effect. Heatwave does 2 damage to a minion and then does 2 to the neighbors, aka does 6 in total. Heatwave sees a little bit of play in Spell Mage because they really need something to deal with the early aggro decks before they can get into their big value turns, and they often take in Heatwave. So it isn't inconceivable that Black Rock Brochure sees some play. Maybe in one of these Bungar decks where you're bunging Dungar into your deck, and you need these spells to live until the late game and you have to deal with the early game aggression. Maybe you're throwing like your Ice Crown Brochure cards, and you accept that sometimes you're going to hit the Blackrock one, and maybe that can deal with some of the 1 health minions from your opponent's board. Or probably more realistically, you're going to have to freeze your opponent's minions, and you'll deal with them at a later date with something a bit more potent. One of the unfortunate things about this card, funnily enough, is that I could see a world where this would see play in Double Rainbow Death Knight, because they run Malted Magma in that deck as their fire spell to give you the Razzle Dazzle effect, and Malted Magma is a pretty bad card. I think if you had the option to pick Malted Magma or Blackrock Brochure, you'd pick Blackrock Brochure. I think that is the better option of the card, because you kind of want this 2-mana fire spell that you get big advantage of when you use it, and then just be done with it. You don't really care about the Malted Magma. It's literally just there to trigger fire and do a little bit of AoE damage. This does a little bit of AoE damage, probably more likely to kill something as well, and triggers your buttons, and actually empties a hand space, which is pretty nice because that deck can generate a lot of value. The downside, though, is that I believe in the deck it's going to be hidden in Ice Crown form, and you don't really want to draw the Ice Crown card as the Frost spell from buttons. There are far better Frost spells, and actually the Frost spells in that Double Rainbow deck are the best parts of the deck. You get the Corpse Skull, you get the... I can't remember now. The Death Knight card that does 3 damage to a guy if he dies, generate another Frost spell. The value card. I think they're both way better than the Ice Crown one, so I don't think this will actually work in that deck. Low-key, though, if this card isn't good enough and you want to see some sort of like small buff to it, I know I'm already talking about buffs and nerfs to cards that aren't even out yet. Actually switching these around so the buttons could hit the Blackrock Brochure for fire, I actually think would be a pretty nice change. Also worth noting, you can put your shaman out into Hunterland, and Chattermaker would actually pretty like these cards. They are targeted spells, but at the same time they do AoE, and I think that's kind of what you want from some of your early game spells if you're going to try and live later into the game, especially against the Insanity Warlock and against the Handbuff Paladin. You need to do both like good single target and something good AoE damage, especially in the early game. And honestly, playing Blackrock Brochure onto something to kill something, or the Ice Crown one to kill something to freeze something, and then play Chattermaker and potentially kill something and freeze 2 other things, actually is pretty obnoxious, and I think it would let you get into your later game where you can get your more value cards out there. And Shaman has a lot of good value cards, so it's not inconceivable to see some play. I don't fully see it though. Alright, now we go to Hunterland, and here is where we're going to get sad. Hunter's in a bit of a weird spot right now. Hunter's got a lot of mechanics, and none of them really work particularly well. So, everyone in this mini-set was like, okay, sure they're going to do something about Hunter. I actually think a lot of people thought Hunter was going to tourist in another class, just to give them an extra pool of cards that maybe make some of the other archetypes flourish. Spoilers, Hunter didn't get the other tourist. They got Monkey Business though. 4 mana. Add 8 bananas to your hand. Any that can't fit are randomly fed to friendly minions in play. Wow, what a weird card. So, in case you're not aware, bananas are a classic card. They're a spell that does gives a minion +1/+1 for 1 mana. This card, text-wise, is very similar to the Badlands Bandits, which is a card that saw 0 play and everyone said it was a really bad card. I think it used to be 7 mana, right? I can't remember now. I think this card was buffed. It still didn't see any play. It just wasn't a good enough effect. Now, Badlands Bandit is 2 more mana, but it generates better cards than the Monkey Business does, because bananas are worse than bandits with bonus effects. I'd say they're kind of like 2 mana cards. The bananas are 1 mana cards. Okay, let me split this card apart and why I've got some like questions about this card. Firstly, what does Hunter do with bananas? Hunter doesn't really have a 1-cost synergy. No, wait, they do. You play your pet parrot after you've played a banana, and your parrot recopies a banana. Magnificent. Magnificent. It's cinema, baby. Peak cinema. By the way, that's not a very good combo, but that is like the one cost combo you have in that class, is the pet parrot. Okay, it's not quite fully true. You could also use the Arrowsmith, and you cast all of your bananas, and each one of them is effectively a 1 mana 1/1 deal 1 kind of minion-esque type thing, but obviously you have to put it on a minion. You assume like Hunter will have some sort of minion on board. It's a pretty aggressive class. Is 1 mana... in fact, you'd have to have the Arrowsmith on the board. There is your minion. You play Arrowsmith and you play 8 bananas on the Arrowsmith and get +8/+8 and deal 8 damage. Absolute cinema. Unfortunately, you'll die before then, so that dream will never be achieved. Simply put, I don't think Hunter has got some good answers for the bananas, and if anything, the bananas aren't great cards to put into your hand. You would definitely prefer the side of the card that feeds them automatically onto the field, so you don't have to pay the 1 mana cost. There are some things you can do with the banana, though, you know, being facetious aside. You could hope that your elemental companion hits Hifar, in which case your bananas are 0 cost, and then you could actually just empty your hand of bananas and put them all into a minion on the field. You just need to roll the 1 in 3 play your Monkey Business into your Hifar and have a minion on the board, and then it's sort of like, you know, 8/8 charge. I'd say 8/8 charge. You're not realistically going to get the 8 bananas, you're going to get something less than that. It's probably like 5/5 charge, that type of thing, 4/4 charge. Cool, 33% chance of doing it, and it requires a 2-card combo over 2 turns and stuff. It's a lot of moving pieces. If you can do this, though, you could also cheat out a Mantle Shaper, which would be pretty nice. I think if you could actually set all of this up consistently, it actually wouldn't be terrible. The problem is you can't set this up consistently at all. Alright, let's get to the other side of the things. If you're feeding bananas to the guys on the field, if you go wide, what are like the value costs associated with that? Well, Mark of the Lotus, which is give all your minions +1/+1, you could conceivably see that if you had a board of 7 minions, you're getting +7/+7 in stats, which is the most that the banana can give you on the board, because obviously playing the Monkey Business will generate 1 hand space, and that will go into your hand, and then the other 7 will go into your minions' mouths. So if you have a really wide board, you're basically playing Mark of the Lotus, which is a 1-mana spell. To be a bit more generous to the monkey business, the Blessing of the Ancients is a 3-mana spell with the same effect. However, it has Twin Spell and it generates the same card again, so you can go like one step further. So I'll be fair and say this is like a 2-mana effect. It's still not particularly good, right? If you go onto the other side of things, where rather you feeding a wide range of beasties, you feed a very small subset of beasties, then you actually get to some pretty nice effects. If you're getting big chungus effects, you could actually potentially get to something close to Blessing Authority. And typically these effects where you give a minion a big, huge amount of stats come at a very expensive cost, because you can kind of see this as a charge-like effect. It's like giving, for example, Blessing of Authority, if you didn't have the rest of the text, would be 5 mana, give a minion 8/8. Oh, give 5 mana play 8/8 charge would basically be the card, but also is making a minion bigger and harder to deal with, so it has like multiple facets to the card. Obviously Blessing of Authority was like toned down, and most of the cards that do give big stats are toned down in the fact they don't give a lot of attack and give more health instead, or they specify you can't attack the opponent's hero with the buffed card. Monkey Business doesn't have that. You can't get to the 8/8, but you could conceivably have a hand full of cards. 1 minion on board, you play your Monkey Business, and suddenly you give a minion on the field 7/7 for 4. Bearing in mind, Blessing of the Kings is 4/4 for 4. Doesn't say any play, but it's not completely out of the realms of possibility that it did see play in a standard meta. It's actually pretty good value. So we found the niche. You want like some minions on the board, but not too many minions on the board, and you need a full hand as well. Now, this is where we're going to get to a little bit of a problem. And actually a solution, because actually Hunter's pretty good at putting random shit into your hand. You could use Awakening Tremors to generate 2 more hand spaces, sorry, because you'd obviously replace the card that you played with another worm, and I get 2 more worms. Similarly with Patchwork Pals, you get +2 cards to your hand. Very nice, filling your hands, make the bananas go on the field, feed your beast bananas. And moreover, there are cards in Hunter that like to get stats. For example, the Twisted Frostwing. Would love to have 7 bananas on it for, you know, a 4 mana 10/10. I guess with Monkey Business, it's in total, if you had to play it on the same turn, it's actually 8 mana for a 10/10 that summons a 10/10 from it, I believe. Cool. Very good. Actually, very good. Here's where things get a little bit messy though. You're not going to get this perfect scenario where you can fill your hand. And actually, I think you're more likely to be playing this in some sort of tokeny based deck, where you're not going to buff one guy, you're probably going to buff multiple guys. You have to put some pressure on, otherwise your opponent is going to kill you. You're going to be playing stuff like your Sneaky Snakes, you're playing your Thorn Mantle Musicians, maybe you play your Barrel Monkeys, which I think is a pretty good card because it doesn't, again, give you a hard hand disadvantage. It just goes neutral, right? You play the card and you get the card back until you've finished the barrel. Hey, what is anti-synergistic with playing a bunch of cards? It's Monkey Business. It doesn't want you to play a bunch of cards. It wants you to fill your hand, have one guy on the board, and then gigabuff it. And your opponent just won't let you do that. They will just keep killing the one guy, if this card was ever good. Or they will just play a bunch of cards, which means that you have to play a bunch of cards, which means your Monkey Business gets worse and worse. So, I just don't see this card working. Also, this card is way better when you play it on 4. If you're playing this towards, you know, like 10 mana, again, your opponent has more ways to deal with this Monkey Business play. If you play this on 4, you're going to mill a card. Like, it puts a card in your hand and you can't do anything with it. So you're probably more likely to play this on 5 so you can play one of the bananas and not overdraw a card. It's just a bit messy. And I've actually got some other gripes with how the dev team has treated Hunter. Hunter, this expansion, tourist into Warrior. And Warrior had a bunch of hand buff cards. Undercut Calamari wants you to hand buff. Cup of Muscle is hand buff. Char, hand buff. And you might be saying, you know, oh, maybe Warrior was meant to be the hand buff side of things, and, you know, Hunter had a very small synergy with it. No, Hunter had hand buff cards as well. Hunter wants to hand buff Spurfang. They want to hand buff King Plush. They even want to hand buff cards around the Observer of Mist, so the Observer of Mist gets better. Obviously, they don't really want to hit it itself, but, you know, hit cards around it gives you a lot more buffs across the field. So I feel like the dev team were both pushing hand buff and field buff Hunter at the same time, and it's kind of just doesn't gel together quite, and it's just really, really, really weird. And one of the other things about all of this, to get back onto the I'll cover this later. I'm actually just ranting at this point. By the way, just as a reminder, Hunter can tourist into Priest, which is really funny because I said that Hunter can't do stuff with the bananas. Priest can actually do stuff with the bananas because they have a one-cost synergy. You could pip the bananas to give you tons of bananas. So many bananas you couldn't possibly hold all the bananas, which is actually pretty nice because every time you play banana, you discount your Thirsty Drifter, and you could pretty easily get your Thirsty Drifter down to 0 fairly quickly with the bananas. I don't think it's a particularly good strategy, but it is something you can consider doing. Other things in Priest that actually like the bananas, if you start putting on your brain masseuse, which does run the Pip and the Thirsty Drifter package in that deck, you could potentially get that minion to stay on the board for longer, so you take more pain procs, and then you could get more buffs to your pain cards, so you could play them more easily than you could before. So it's actually not crazy to put this banana in that deck. Also, the bananas are pretty good cards for Raza. I don't think there's any synergy with Raza right now that works particularly well, but in case there ever is, there's like a good Priest hero that comes out. Bunch of bananas via Monkey Business would not be the worst way to set off the Raza resealed effect. Oh, and by the way, I don't normally talk about Wild in these cards reveals. Is this a disgusting thing for Wild? I can't decide yet. Radiant Elemental exists in Wild, which makes your spells cost 1 less. I only mention this because the Sorcerer's Apprentice from Mage got its effect changed. It used to make spells cost 1 less. It's now spells cost 1 less, but not less than 1. And they threw it back out as 2 mana. They didn't touch Radiant Elemental. Radiant Elemental, if you have 8 bananas in your hand, is 0 mana plus 8 plus 8. And that seems disgusting to me, but maybe that's not good enough for Wild in turn 4, I suppose, or around 4 with the Radiant Elemental Monkey Business. I guess you'd have to play it around 6, so maybe it's just simply too slow, but just watch out for any spell discounts in Priestland, because Monkey Business could do some really spooky things. Alright, now we get to a card, and actually, by the way, just to mention that previous card, I don't hate the card Monkey Business, but I just don't think it's particularly good. Or at least it needs a little bit more framework around it. Workhorse, I think, is actually just a good card. It's a 3 mana 4/2 beast, Death Rattle, summon 2 2/1 ponies. Very similar to Batty Guess, which was a 1 mana 1/1. Death Rattle summoned 1 2/1 bat. And this card saw play from Nathria in kind of like this mid-rangey Hunter deck, which tried to like cheat out some big guys around the mid-game and swarm your opponent with like Colossi and that type of thing. And actually some cleaving effect in that deck, I believe. Workhorse, for 2 more mana, you're getting 4 stats, quick maths, which is pretty decent, and you get another 2/1 on top of that. All in all, that packages together is a pretty nice bundle. It also works pretty nicely with the tokeny or the spell tokeny Hunter deck that currently runs like remote control to give you some minions on board. And then they don't actually, I mean, this might not be true, but I checked HS Replay before. A lot of these decks don't run any 3-drops. And Workhorse could just slot into this 3-drop territory where it's a card that you don't really want to kill as the opponent because you're going to generate 2/1 ponies, which is really scary for Saddle Up or RC Rampage, the other 4-drop that would play in that deck. So maybe Workhorse just slots into this deck. Do I think it's enough to push the token deck? No, I think it's not good enough at all. Also, it's very susceptible. I know that like Death Rattle Generate a Guy is a sticky effect, but they are so fragile, both the original minion and the ponies. I don't think it's inconceivable that a class would have a minion that could trade into the 4/2 and then do 1 damage to all to trade off the other ponies. So I don't think this card is actually good enough to see any play, but it's not crazy based on the stats. Like, it's 3 mana, 8/4 in stats, but it's just how the stats come out of the wash, which I think is going to be the issue. There is also like Beast Hunter synergy, but I don't think Beast Hunter is also strong enough right now to work on its own merit. And I think that kind of blends into the token deck anyway. But watch out for Death Rattle, Beast, various other Hunter archetypes that they might add to the game. Alright, the sad thing is that I think this is the best Hunter card you're going to get. Any Hunter enjoyers? The last card is Cash Cow. 5 mana 3/7 Beast. Taunt. Whenever this takes damage, get a coin. Alright, I didn't think you could do it. A card is pushing Announce Darkness for the worst card ever printed. What is this card? Like, why is this in Hunter? I just simply don't understand. Obviously, this isn't as bad as Announce Darkness, because if you play Announce Darkness for most classes, you lose the game. Cash Cow isn't quite at that level, but it's pretty close, because it's a pretty bad card. It's understated, is the first thing. That is not great in Standard. You typically don't want to play understated cards. Then the effect of the card itself isn't that good. if you generate, and let's be reasonable here, let's just say your opponent trades into this with 2 guys and kills it to give you 2 coins. You might argue that it's like a 3-mana 3/7 taunt, which is a pretty good thing, but it isn't really. Like, you still play the understated 5-drop, you lost tempo for that turn, to give you tempo for the future, and I guess that's what Cash Cow is to give you some tempo for the future for maybe your big beast decks. Problem, you don't want to put Cash Cow in your big beast deck, because it's actually a pretty big beast in its own right, and it hits a lot of the big beast cards, so... terrible card. Alright, now, I know what you're saying. Andalono, Hunter, Touristing, Warrior. And Warrior is the class that has historically had enrage-like mechanics. Like, they've had the Frothing Berserker, and they've had stuff like Warpath to do 1 damage to all your minions. You keep doing 1 damage to all of your minions, and you get money. You get money. Cool. Money, right? That's it, right? It's because you want a Tourist in Warrior, and Warrior has the... Oh, wait. Of course. Peril in the Paradise Warrior set has no enrage enablers. Basically nothing. There is char, but obviously you don't want to char your Cash Cow, because you get 1 coin for, I think it's 9 mana, right? That's a pretty bad deal. Also, I don't think it has got a good enough coin synergy, because I guess the idea of the coins is that you would cheat out something ginormous. It's just ill thought out. Why would you not just play Breakfast Hunter if you wanted to cheat out something, which does the same thing and requires similar levels of setting up? It just doesn't make sense. But let's try and make sense of this, okay? Let's give the Hearthstone balance team some credit. What can we do? Maybe the secret was that he didn't go into Warrior, because Priest can go into Hunter. And Priest does have a sort of enraged enabler in Nightshade Tea. And actually has a card that would like coins in Rise of the Resealed. Brain Palace opens. Here's the combo. You play Rise of the Resealed. On a future turn, you play your Papercraft Angel. You play your Cash Cow. You Nightshade Tea your Cash Cow. Now, this is where things get complicated. You generate a coin and a 3/5. Then, you push the button on your Cash Cow to turn it back into a 3/7, and then you play the coin, refreshing your hero power, giving you 1 mana to play another Nightshade Tea from the second drink, to hit your Cash Cow, to then go back into the cycle, and you only run out eventually when you run out of Nightshade Teas. All in all, this does 6 damage to your face. A 4-card, 8-mana combo, if you ignore the Raza mana cost, that you assume, that came on another turn. You do 6 damage to your face. Oh, sorry, also you get 5/10 in stats, and 3/7 a taunt. Okay, maybe Priest isn't the class, because remember, Shaman can now go into Hunterland, and actually Shaman does have some pretty good enrage enablers. They have stuff like Jam Session, which isn't great, but it's not terrible. At least you can do 1 damage to your minion. They have Aftershocks, which is 3 separate 1 damage instances, and that potentially for 3 mana can generate you 3 coins! You can also Baking Soda Volcano your own minion with your opponent's minions, and potentially for 9 mana you can generate 7 coins. Don't tell anyone. Shh. That's a combo between me and you. Pay 9 mana, get 7 mana back. Now, obviously, that doesn't quite, not just work, but it isn't quite fair to say that, because in some sense, if there was a super combo that required 15 mana, like a 2-card combo, potentially would like these 5 coins. I just don't see a world where the Cash Cow works. Like, the coins just don't matter that much for Shaman. There are more cheaty things they can do without the coins. It doesn't matter that much for Priest either, and Priest can't really enable it particularly well. Hunter doesn't care about it. Warrior doesn't care about it. You know who cares about it? Rogue! Rogue would love coins! They have a Wishing Well. Why is it not a Rogue card? Also, funnily enough, Linessa wouldn't mind coins. If you want to do your OTK Linessa, cast all the spells in your deck, you like coins in that deck, because coins are worth 2 mana. It's 0 mana, gain 2 mana. That is twice as good as any of the other classes, so I could even see a world where they saw playing Paladin. I wouldn't be like, okay, that's not crazy. I see the world. Also, Cash Cow, things involving money are normally rogue cards. Why is it in Hunter? I just don't get it. I only can assume at some point along the development path line, they were going to put a tourist card from Hunter into Rogue, or vice versa, probably vice versa, Rogue into Hunter, and then decided not to. Like, it got scrapped, but the Cash Cow didn't, and the Cash Cow lived. So, I don't know. I don't see why this is a Hunter card. It honestly could have been a neutral card as well. I don't think it would have been crazy to be a neutral card. I just think Hunter has been done real dirty this mini set, and pretty poorly during the set, full stop. Anyway, rant over. Let's get to Warrior cards. Oh, by the way, obviously Hunter can go into Warrior, so maybe this is where the Hunter cards are. Maybe they're hiding in Warrior. And we have Alloy Advisor, a 4-mana 2/6 mech taunt. Whenever this takes damage, gain 3 armor. This card basically falls into like the trio of Eternium Rover, Ally Armorsmith, which is the card it very closely aligns to, and Armorsmith. I say it closely aligns to Ally Armorsmith, sorry, which I think is what this is based on, as it's 1 mana less for 1/1 fewer stats and has the same effect-ish. Now, I say ish because it's actually probably better. Ally Armorsmith gives you armor equal to the damage the minion takes, so potentially if you smashed it into a ginormous minion, you could actually get a shit ton of armor off the Ally Armorsmith. Instead of Ally Armorsmith, you give you a lot more armor. It's sort of like a marriage between Ally Armorsmith, this is a tongue twister by the way, and Eternium Rover, where you get a preset amount of armor for every damage that minion takes. And that's actually pretty good. All of these 3 cards during some point in Hearthstone's history have seen some play in a control deck just to slow the game down and let you get into the late game to do all your disgusting control related stuff. And there is some disgusting control-related stuff you can do in Warrior. You can still play Odin. It's not a particularly good deck right now because a lot of the Hunter cards got a 1-mana increase on them, which means they can't deal with the big ginormous board states that can be generated by Hand of Paladin, by Insanity Warlock, by Pain Warlock. Hell, even by some of the Hunter decks, I think Warrior would probably struggle to deal with now from the aggression. And obviously, like the Overheal Priest decks, the Zarimi Priest decks, yada yada yada. They kind of struggle to deal with the early game aggression. If you can deal with it though, an Ally Advisor both helps you deal with the early game aggression and set up some sort of combo to kill people with. Maybe this is actually a card that will just gel the package back together again and it becomes viable. I think this is a general consensus of this mini set, at least from what I'm seeing. A lot of the cards in there are sort of trying to enable more value and more control decks to thrive in a world with quite a lot of aggression. There are obviously some other things you can do with the Alloy Advisor after you've Odin'd. You could try and set it up as some sort of combo deck where you play, an Aftershocks with a Razorfen Rockstar. That means for every 1 damage you take via the Aftershocks, you're actually gaining 5 armor, which for Odin is damage, right? It's not only just the armor, you get the damage. With 1 Razorfen Rockstar, Aftershocks, and Alloy Advisor, you're getting 15 damage. If you play 2 of them, you're getting 21 damage. This is for either 9 or 10 mana. Depends on the discount you get on the Aftershocks. If it's 1, it's 8 or 9, obviously. It's not good enough for an OTK deck, but, it's not bad. It's like an anti-aggro tool. You're doing 3 damage to all minions, you're getting 21 armor, and you're pushing 21 damage at the same time. It's pretty disgusting, really. You could also play the Alloy Advisor with a Bladestone, by both. I mean, all of these cards that we've talked about, by the way, right now, are seen playing Control Warrior. Not a great deck right now. I think it's somewhere around tier 3, maybe even in tier 4 region. But Bladestorming your Alloy Advisor in Odin mode is 7 mana for 18 damage. That's pretty good, honestly. It's not great. There are definitely better ways to get more armor for the mana cost, but it's not completely terrible if you're looking for just a little bit of extra on the finisher. Now, there are some other things I considered, but I don't think it's going to be viable. If you could get this reliably damaged, you could hit it with Battle 1 Faceless, to get more armor. Rather than using Razorfen, you generate more Alloy Advisors. You could also hit it with Crimson Expanse, which I think is just simply too slow. I think overall, it's not worth trying to set up this 30 damage combo with an Alloy Advisor. It's best just to take your 15 or 20 armor that you're going to get from it, which is a lot, and just smoke them into the face and kill them over 2 turns instead, whilst also yourself staying alive in the process. Alright, I hate to do this, but does Hunter want to use this card? Because they can Tourist in Warrior. Well, Hunter has a hand buff deck. It's not the worst thing to hit the Alloy Advisor with a hand buff card, because it does let you get into the later game, and I think the whole point of this Hunter Warrior deck was that you could do a couple of more circle with Concierge and Tidepool Pupil, when this was 3 and 1 mana, by the way, to generate a huge amount of stats and minions in your hand, and you'd use the typically more aggressive Hunter minions to cleave through your opponent, do huge amounts of damage, maybe try and charge something through with a Leroy. I think this was the idea of the deck. It doesn't work though, but maybe along the way, if you give some hand buffs to your Alloy Advisor, you just plonk one of these down on the board, maybe that gives you enough armor and deals with enough aggro that lets you live long enough to get the Cup of Mud Circle, Tidepool Pupil, Concierge play off. Problem, this combo has had 2 cards nerfed in it, and the combo didn't work when it was 1 mana for Cup of Must Circle, 1 mana for Tide Pool Pupil, and Concierge at 3. This didn't work. It was just not as good as compared to like a Druid play instead, with their drink instead, the Chalice. So I simply think this can't work anymore. I just think Hunter is cursed. I think Hunter is cursed. Alright, now we get to Reserved Spot, a 3 mana spell. Give a random minion in your hand, +4/+4. If it's the only one there, reduces cost by 2. You don't learn your lesson, old man. Stop trying to make decks that have such severe requirements. I guess in some regards, it's pretty good design, because you're getting a decent effect off if you do, you know, make your deck really, really cursed. As a comparison to this card, I just want to point out Don Hancho, which saw a little bit of play in Handbuff Paladin back in the past, where it wasn't a very good deck, as the Handbuff cards were not as insane as they are now. That card was 5 mana, 5/5, give a minion in your hand, +5/+5. Reserve Spot for 2 less mana, gives you 1/1 less stats, and also doesn't give you the 5/5. So I'd actually argue the Reserve Spot, if you don't hit the only minion in your hand to get the mana discount, is worse than Don Hancho. That's not great. That's a pretty bad start to the card. Also pretty bad signs for the card is Smelt doesn't see any play right now, and Smelt can give you +6/+6 to a random minion in your hand. It can actually hit, I think it's the 3/3 on 2 random minions, so it's not quite giving 6/6 to 1. It could potentially hit 2 separate ones for 3/3 instead. It's considerably easier to get 3 armor though, than have only 1 minion in your hand as you would need for a Reserved Spot. So I just don't think the package is there for Handbuff Hunter or Handbuff Warrior. I just simply think Paladin is better at doing it than they are. If you're going to try and do it with Reserved Spot, you're going to have to use Bungar in your deck and bundle him into the deck and hope and pray. Because realistically, 3 mana give a minion in your hand +4/+4 is not that good. I think it's around about where you'd expect for an average card, which for standard isn't good enough. You kind of want above average. You want to be really cheaty in standard. If you can get sort of like 1 mana-esque, get 4/4+4/+4 on a minion in your hand, that's obviously fantastic. And that's kind of what you need to do with the minion reduction. Now, the minion reduction though is if it's only minion in your hand, which means you have to run a deck with very few minions, and Bungar wants your deck to have very few minions in your deck. It's not guaranteed though, you might draw patches, and if you draw patches, Reserve Spot is such a bad card. And like I've alluded to before, 3 mana do nothing is really bad. Like, it's a horrible thing to do. You have to have a huge cheat turn afterwards to bounce back from it, and I simply don't think that Warrior can do it right now. I actually don't think any of the classes can really live through the early game aggression of some of the other decks. I think the 2 that have probably got some like the better chances are Priest and Warlock right now. Maybe Shaman as well into that package if you like really stack the cheap spells early. All to generate like a big board that might not work in the end. I just think it's a pipe dream. I think it's going to happen like... I'm going to be generous here. Let's say it works 2 out of 5 times. It's still only a 40% win rate, so I think it's going to be well below 50%. I actually think it's going to be less than that even. Some of the things you could do about this is potentially if you hit Bungar and it's the only minion in your hand, which is the ideal scenario, you could play Bungar on 7 instead, and obviously Bungar on 7 is better than Bungar on 9. It gives you less opportunity to draw patches, which is good. Also, potentially you could generate a cheaper version of Unkiliax to play that on 7 instead. Chemical Spill is probably a better way of doing that though, but you could do it. Which is nice for stuff like Hydration Station, where you want to get these taunt minions out early to generate the value from Hydration Station as soon as possible to deal with this onslaught of aggression that could exist in the current meta. Alright, the final card that Warrior got is Punch card. I actually like this card. 3 mana, give your hero +3 attack and also damages adjacent minions this turn. That's fun, it's a cleave effect, and actually somewhat, and I dare not say this, somewhat in flavour with Hunter. They had a cleave package, so, you know, this isn't crazy to be a card in both Hunter and Warrior. It's kind of like, it reminds me a little bit of Super Collider. It's really the effect of Shadowmon that was on Scourge Lord Garrosh, which damaged adjacent minions as well. That was a 4/3 weapon though, rather than getting just +3 attack to your hero. Super Collider obviously didn't give you the same thing as a cleave, but it was almost sort of like it, because you'd hit a minion into your opponent's minion, which normally would kill either both the minions or just one of the minions, but ideally it would kill 2 minions. And I think that's kind of what you're expecting on cleave. Maybe you get the 3, but you're at least trying to hit 2 minions and kill 2 minions with it. Alright, I've given it the seal of approval. It's a fun card. What we need, and surely Warrior has this. Warrior has many weapons. We need a card that says something like, if we kill something, something happens. Because that would make Punch Card chef kiss. Better still, what if Hunter had it? Alright, let's go through the weapons. Fiery War Axe. No, that doesn't have anything about killing minions. Remakes Tuning Fork. Trust me, none of those effects actually have that. And actually, one of them is Cleave, so you obviously don't want to hit Punch Card on the Cleave on the Tuning Fork. Oh, no. 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 No, absolutely not. Okay, so Warrior has no card, and actually, to be fair, in the course of Hearthstone, there's actually not that many weapons that have an effect based upon killing an opponent's minion with either your hero or a weapon. It's actually a pretty small pool. But maybe Hunter has one of them. No. 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 Insert the meme where, you know, the guy's drinking from the vodka bottle, you know, in the car and just spits it out and is crying. This card is... It's really fun, but I wish it had, like, a little bit more nuance to it. Like, a bit of, like... A little bit of extra zizz. Like, just a little mixer of something else in the card where potentially you could generate, like, a weapon that says, you know, if I kill something, something else happens. That would be really cool with the Punch Card. It would make it very, very good, potentially. Oh, by the way, Druid also obviously could play this in Warrior Druid land. They only have one weapon, which doesn't really matter with the attacking adjacent stuff. Classes that do have stuff, though. Imagine if Death Knight had this. And Frostmourne. That would be really funny. You turn your Frostmourne for 9 mana into a 7-3 with Cleave, and every minion you kill goes into the Frostmourne to, you know, resummon it later. That'd be really fun. Unfortunately, this is not something you can do, and this is going to be the story of this card. You could also have this in Demon Hunter, which has weapon packages. Or it would have been fun to have this in Demon Hunter, sorry. Hitting this with Lifesteal. Cleave, Lifesteal. Chef Kiss, very good combo. Potentially this would be 15 damage across 3 minions. Heal 15. That'd be a really good stabilization tool for Demon Hunter, which I think they're trying to push some sort of value big Demon Hunter package, but without any of the way to sustain till the end game. Then if you go through the history of Hearthstone, I've not gone through all the cards, wouldn't it be really cool if this card was printed with like Overkill or Honorable Kill? Just so that your weapon might be able to do something really fun. Like, imagine that Faraki Battle Axe wasn't a Paladin card, was still in Standard, didn't say Overkill because obviously it couldn't because that mechanic is now from a previous set, and was in Warrior or Hunter. That is the hand buff card that maybe they need. You do 6 damage as a cleaving effect, maybe you kill 3 guys and get +6/+6 to minions in your hand. For 8 mana, I don't think that's inconceivably unbalanced. I think that's a very strong effect. Probably not strong enough for Standard even, but... Punch Card is just... It's like 3 mana, deal 9 damage to minions, take some damage back. It's okay, I don't think it's bad, but I think there were some really fun things you could do with this card that have just been missed. Worry not though, Hunter fans, and Hunter Wild fans, I have the combo for you, Hunter. This is what they wanted all along. If you're playing Wild, you can play your Venom Strike Bow with the Punch Card and Cleave for Poisonous. 7 mana, kill 3 guys, assuming you have Divine Shield. That's cinema, baby. Oh, by the way, the other card that really, really salted me up as well. Doesn't work, by the way, just letting you know, I put a big text on the side. Imagine this card could be put into Button Druid, a card that craved some form of AoE damage, especially AoE damage that, you know, was related to attacking or related to the button. And Druid just sort of doesn't have options in that regard. Imagine you could play Punch Card in that deck. It's so, like, synergistic. It'd be so nice. Maybe it's too strong. Maybe I'm, like, you know, huffing something. You get a bit of armor. You get a bit of attack from the button. You play your Punch Card. You can protect your face a little bit from the retaliation damage from your opponent minion. And you cleave for, like, you know, 12 damage in total. It's not that OP, surely, right? But obviously you can't do it because Warrior can go into Druid, but they can't put Groovy Cat in the deck because that is not a Perils in Paradise card. You would need Druid to Taurus into Warrior, which they obviously don't do, so it doesn't work, and I feel sad. Okay. Oh. That is it. By the way, spoilers, I often do these in PowerPoint. I forgot, I'm cutting it off here. That'll do it for the part 1. I promise you there are better things incoming. I won't keep railing on Hunter. I'll do it a little bit, I promise you, but I won't keep railing on Hunter going forwards. I think on the next episode I'm going to deal with Mage, Priest, Demon Hunter, maybe a little bit more as well, so join me for that as well. Goodbye.